On this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, it's trade season, and Damichael Cole and I have all the latest rumors and tips and tricks to talk about here on Locked On Grizzlies. Plus, I have a theory that Damichael may or may not completely squash when it comes to what Memphis is doing at the 5 position long term. And the Grizzlies are in New York at the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, to take on, that dude from the Knicks and the New York Knickerbockers, Jalen Brunson, of course. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Lock in with us.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello once again, and welcome to Locked On Grizzlies on this Tuesday edition of the show. It is I, Joe Mullinax, your co-host, back after a birthday hiatus. Thanks to everybody that wished me a happy birthday. I'm 22 going on 22 plus 15. I'm 37 now, unfortunately.
There you
go. I gotta be honest here. Well, the hairline gives me away. Right, people are going to be like 37. I thought he was 57. But it's good to be back with you. I appreciate my partner Damichael Cole from the Commercial Appeal filling in for the solo show on my birthday. I'm happy to be back. Happy to be talking with Damichael once again, some Grizzlies basketball, and most importantly, no offense to Michael, I know you would agree with this. I'm so glad that our dear listeners and dear viewers are with us here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your best bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are free and available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are over on YouTube. Make sure you're checking us out there. Over 3,000 subscribers and counting. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Whether you're an everydayer, which hopefully all of you are. I'm looking at you. I'm talking to you, dear listener, dear viewer. Hopefully, you're checking us out each and every time an episode drops. But if not, if this is your first time, you come around every once in a while, hopefully you hit that subscribe button and you are with us each and every day on Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael Cole, I thought you did a wonderful job on the Monday edition of the show. And goodness gracious, they did not give you much to talk about. The Marcus Smart segment was nice, and you could tell the love that Boston had for Marcus Smart. But when 13 of the 15 actual contract players are out, we should talk to our bosses. We should have been able to have an injury designation. Like Joe Mullinax, doubtful, old. Damichael Cole, doubtful, tired, right? Like I feel like when
some soreness.
The podcasters are sore after all this work.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I've had people, not just fans, like I've been talking to people around the league about this, and the general thought is just people are just surprised. Like I had a couple people say that they haven't seen, a situation like this before. I know one person compared it to what the Warriors went through, I think about 3-4 years ago when Steph Curry was out there. But I mean, he missed a lot of the season. Draymond missed a lot of the season, and Clay was out. That entire situation had someone compared to that. But this is very unique. Even then, the Warriors had a lot of their younger players. Jordan Poole, for example, was getting a lot of playing time that season and whatnot. This is one of those things where you try to find the silver linings, but it's not hard to. I mean, it's hard to find them. I mean, outside of what Vince and Gigi Jackson, you're not really getting to see too much right now.
Well, the silver lining is it's trade season, partner. I need an air horn or something like that. Need to see if we have that sound effect. But it is trade season here on Locked On Grizzlies, and I am a fan of trade season. Damichael Cole, not so much, but I'm a fan of the trade rumors, all the speculation, and the Grizzlies. While they're not in the mix for a big name player, they are certainly in the mix in terms of making another trade for financial reasons. And the one that was the talk of Grizzlies X, Grizzlies Twitter, whatever you call it now, was Killian Hayes. Now, that's not the sexiest name, right? We're a family show, so we're not going to get too sexy here on Locked On Grizzlies. I don't want people to, get all hot and bothered by me. But we are going to talk Killian Hayes because of the reality of the Grizzlies situation. Because I think that trade, when I saw that rumor come up, and I think correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation, partner, Michael Scudo.
Mm-hmm. I don't know off the top of my head. I just call him Mike.
Two.
Yeah.
Mike. So we'll count Mike. We're on a first name basis, Mike and I. So Mike, he has the Grizzlies perhaps being in the mix, and other places have kind of said similar things with the Pistons. Killian Hayes, right? He and Zaire Williams are basically the same player, right? Obviously different frames, different size. You could say different position, combo guard, combo forward, whatever the case might be. But they're basically, in terms of how they contribute to winning basketball, the numbers are very similar. The number that matters the most in that trade, and it kind of gives a window into how the Grizzlies might be perceiving this trade deadline, partner, is the fact that Hayes is on an expiring contract, whereas Zaire Williams is not, or whereas Jake LaRavia is not, or David Roddy is not, John Conchar is not. And the Grizzlies are clearing the various aprons that are part of the luxury tax. It appears, and we'll talk more about this later in the show, that they're trying to get out of the luxury tax entirely, at least to start the offseason, so that would enable them to have more roster flexibility with a full mid-level exception and those sorts of things. I am intrigued by this trade because I am very much of the mindset, Damichael, this season is punted, right? Like Desmond Bane, if he doesn't play again, cool. Marcus Smart, he doesn't play again, fine. Just do the best you can. If they're healthy and they want to play, sure. But this is not a season that the Grizzlies are going to come back and make any noise. They don't have Ja Morant. It's just extremely unlikely. With that in mind, you might as well put yourself in the best position for a season next year where, whether it's Taylor Jenkins, Zach Kleiman, a lot of these dudes are going to be interested, or at least they should be interested, in being as competitive as they can be. If you're outside of the luxury tax to start the offseason, it gives you so many more options to improve your roster, Damichael.
Yeah, it's the same point that I feel like I've been making for like a few weeks now in terms of the idea of this team going into the trade deadline has always been roster flexibility. That has always been the Grizzlies' angle. That's why I know people have these sweet dreams of going after, these big time future star type players. And I just don't see that being the case right now. We can revisit in the summer. The Grizzlies are capable of making a splash type of deal in the summer. But as of the trade deadline, it's about creating the flexibility. This is something that, again, talking to people around the Grizzlies, this is the idea that the team has had. Even talking with Taylor Jenkins the other day about the Steven Adams move, the first thing that he kind of brought up after he, said a bunch of good things about Steven Adams was the flexibility that this gives the team. Everyone knows the situation. The Grizzlies, because they've tripled down on youth, as Zach Kleiman said, himself, because they handed out contract extensions, like it was a piece of paper to everyone. I mean, everybody was getting contract extensions around here. And eventually the tab came. And now that the tab is here, you can't keep all these guys, and certain players aren't developing how you envision them to develop. So getting back to this deal, I've always said the best point of attack for the Grizzlies in February right now is trying to salvage this situation in terms of getting off of some of those contracts where it's like, okay, this guy clearly isn't going to work in Memphis, and bringing in and expiring. They did that already. Steven Adams, we can debate all day what he meant to the Grizzlies. I feel like he should have been one of the guys that was kept, but that's a conversation for another day. But at the end of the day, moving Steven Adams, you got to expiring contract back in Victor Oladipo. If you move Zaire Williams, if you move Jake LaRavia, whoever in that wing conversation, David Roddy, whoever it is, get an expiring contract back, because at the end of the day, whatever you move them for, in this case, we're talking Killian Hayes, you can upgrade in the summer. You can potentially upgrade in the summer. You mentioned the luxury tax and things like that. They know that bill's coming. I think it's less about the luxury tax for the Grizzlies, and it's more about, the first and second aprons and the restrictions that come around those designations. For example, right now, because I know Grizzlies fans, we haven't talked much about first and second apron stuff, because that's a conversation that's going to be very relevant around here next season. But case in point, Kyle Lowry, for example, just first example that just came to my mind. Mm-hmm. He right now is with the Charlotte Hornets, and he could be a very impactful pickup, for a team, right? And now certain teams, I think the Suns, the Celtics, a bunch of first apron teams, they are not allowed to trade or get him in a potential buyout. If he's bought out, those teams cannot acquire him because they are in the first and second apron. So it's those type of limitations that you face. They only can get players that are like on mid-level exception contracts that make less than a certain amount. So you're basically not going to be allowed to make those big swings in the past where we see teams, get bought out players that are high impact type players.
I want to stress that I think the 2024-2025 Memphis Grizzlies will be in the luxury tax.
Oh, yeah.
I think that they are serious about contending. My point is, entering the offseason, you don't want to be in it so you're not a repeat tax offender, so that you have the ability to use that full mid-level exception. There's a difference, and I know you know this, Damichael, between the taxpayers mid-level exception and the non-taxpayers mid-level exception, several $1 million. Yeah. So however they use that money, that is the reason they might want to get there now. They will be a tax-paying team, where I think Damichael and I are on the same page. They will not be a second apron team. That's extremely unlikely. They'll live in that first apron to second apron world, would be my guess. And they're trying to get as much flexibility between now and then as possible. Speaking of flexibility, I have a theory that I'm curious to get Damichael Cole's take on regarding the center position and the future of it here in Memphis. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Damichael, I know that you know this, and I know that our audience almost certainly knows it, but the Super Bowl is approaching. Happy Super Bowl week to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about getting the best seat in your couch or in your chair, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. I love eating some delicious chicken wings, maybe a little barbecue, like in Memphis, how Memphis does barbecue so well. Then I like to scan on FanDuel, maybe pick a player prop, all the stuff involving Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. I'm all about it. I'm a supporter of love to Damichael Cole, and I also love FanDuel. It has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. You can bet on which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more with Super Bowl 58 on the horizon. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're talking getting small at the big man spot. Stick with us here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. Make sure you're following him on X if you don't already do so, at Damichael C. You can follow me on X if you want to get angry, at Joe Mullinax. We've been talking about trade rumors. I'm all about trade rumors this time of year. If you want that on X, I'm your guy. All right. But I'm also interested in a bit of a conspiracy theory. And I want to stress this to Damichael Cole. This can be our little secret. Our listeners, our viewers, they can just kind of, just be quiet for a second. I think the Grizzlies might be trying to do something interesting. And here's what I mean by trying to do something interesting. They traded away Steven Adams, which you mentioned earlier in the show, an interesting thing, because Steven Adams, in my opinion, unquestionably impacted winning, right? Like, he was a winning basketball player. He helped that team in terms of rebounding and all sorts of areas where Memphis was weak. How are they going to replace him? Are they going to be able to replace him? Here's my take, Damichael. Do they want to replace him? Exhibit A, Brandon Clark, returning from injury, supposedly within the next several weeks. Brandon Clark, technically a forward, but can certainly play center, has the leap ability and the athleticism to be a strong rim protector, potentially. Exhibit B, Xavier Tillman. All the moves that are being made to get under the luxury tax, maybe a mid-level exception offer to keep X and his unique versatility defensively. Exhibit C, all the other small ball centers that they've been experimenting with, whether it is a guy on a 10-day contract, whether it's David Roddy. I've noticed this, Damichael. I don't know if you haven't noticed this or not. Do you think perhaps that the Grizzlies might be interested long-term and having a 6'11" power forward and a 6'8" or so center? Is it possible that versatility is going to win and rule the day in Memphis long term?
Joe, this is a family stream, right?
Family show. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Family show.
Show.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I won't say the first thing that came to mind. I'll just say no. No.
I think you can say heck no if you want.
Heck no.
Okay, yeah,
heck no.
Oof.
This, Joe. All right, let me vent for a little bit.
I feel like I disappointed you.
No. This isn't your fault, Joe.
I'm gonna cry on the show.
No, Joe, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. This is just, there's a problem that I have around professional sports sometimes, and it's not even just particularly to basketball. Here's a problem that happens. Sometimes teams, when they get close, when you're almost there, and you just need to just add on the margins a little bit. You try too hard to reinvent the wheel by taking away from a key area that you're really good at, and you create another weakness. Let's go back to the Grizzlies over the last 4 years. They've been the best paint scoring team by far. They've been the best transition scoring team by far. True. They have been the best rebounding, defensive and offensive rebounding team by far. Moving Steven Adams, you have taken away one of the key areas that you were one of the best teams, what you were the best team at while he was out. If you go get a small, I do think it could work in theory, but we'll get into it. If you go get a guy, it better be a dog. It better be Jared Vanderbilt, a guy who's known as I can go get you double-digit rebounds.
I like that idea.
It can't be someone who's gonna go get you 7 boards and things like that. But I don't think that's the route. When Taylor Jenkins was talking, he did mention what you said, Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5. But he also mentioned the idea of going out and basically replacing Steven Adams with a Steven Adams light. He said, in his words, he said a Steven Adams archetype. That type of player, with the aggressiveness, the hard screening, the rebounding. That's what you need. Because guess what? Joe, let's do a quick game real quick. I like when I put you on the spot because you're real quick on your feet, Joe. Let's tell me right now who your top 4 teams are in the Western Conference. Just off the top of your head, right now.
Top 4 teams in the Western Conference. I'd go Denver Nuggets, Los Angeles Clippers, Phoenix Suns, and Minnesota Timberwolves.
Oh, this is why I like when you think on your feet. You said the Denver Nuggets killed the Grizzlies on
Nikola
the glass.
Jokic.
Killed them on the glass earlier this season.
And probably arguably the best player on the planet is a big.
Los Angeles Clippers killed the Grizzlies on the glass with Zubac.
That was
20
Zubac.
rebound game.
Mm-hmm.
Timberwolves with Gobert killed the Grizzlies.
Towns.
Towns too, but they killed the Grizzlies on the glass. And Tillman played against these things, by the way, since we're talking Xavier Tillman a little bit.
That's true.
Phoenix Suns with Nurkic earlier this season killed the Grizzlies on the gas. Couldn't do anything with them. You see where I'm getting at here?
I'm picking up what you're putting down. I'm smelling what you're cooking.
If you want to beat the top teams, that's why I didn't like the Steven Adams trade for what it was. I agree with the idea that one of those bigger contracts had to be moved. Not going to say who yet. We can get into that to another episode. But that wasn't the guy that I would have moved because he is the best at what he does. And now you have to you take away one of your elite areas. And the Grizzlies are built around rebounding. So here's what I'll say. A small center in Memphis, I don't like the idea. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not a good enough rebounder to put a 6'7", 6'8" guy who has great leaping ability beside him and say, hey, we got Zubac tonight. Let's see what we can do. Or we got Towns and Gobert. Because these are the guys that you're gonna have to beat. These are the guys you're gonna be matched up with. And I just it doesn't work for me. Not the way the Grizzlies play basketball.
I think that's fair. And I also am hesitant, even if it was Draymond Green, right? Because there's the article.
Yeah, I didn't even like that. I was like, what?
Like for a day, Draymond. Well, I hated it because of the money, right? Why would they, if they're moving on from Steven Adams for $12 million, why would they bring in Draymond for that much more money?
No sense.
I think that I'm with you. Okay. I want to stress that. I just like to rile up Damichael every once in a while here on Locked On Grizzlies. I've been told that I like to fish for reactions at times, and I'm innocent of that. You can never prove it. I like Nick Richards. I like that idea a lot. Yeah. I don't know what that would cost from Charlotte, but I think that is a guy that's under contract for the next couple of seasons at $5 million per.
Yep.
His production project to being a starter? Because he doesn't. Obviously, Charlotte's struggling. Even when he does start, it's not in a massive role. Him starting for a team that's trying to compete for a championship, I could get why people are nervous about that. But his numbers are sound. He's got a big body, can move really well. I would love that idea because, again, the price is right. How the Grizzlies get there, what they'd have to give up, that's certainly a fair question. But I'm with you. I think that they need another big – the proof is in the pudding, right? So much talk has been made of the elite scoring and needing to have a guy like a Jamal Murray, which is true. Obviously, the Suns kind of tripling down on that with Booker and Beal and Durant.
Yeah.
But you made a great point. All those teams also have really good big men that are sound defensively, but even more importantly than that, they rebound extremely well. And I do think that that matters a lot in this NBA, and it's going to be interesting to see how Memphis replaces that. They're going to have to find a way, one way or another. They're also going to have to replace some bodies on the floor coming up in the world's most famous arena tonight as the Grizzlies take on the Knicks. A little bit of an earlier start time there in New York City. Damichael and I are going to talk about that contest next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, the NBA trade deadline is fast approaching, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball is your place for live reaction Thursday at 1 p.m. You can subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube today. Don't miss Josh Lloyd breaking down every NBA trade with analysis and insight that you can only get from Locked On Fantasy Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by BetterHelp. This time of year, it's important to understand that we got to get things off our chest every once in a while. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out. And that's even true in sports, right? Like Marc Gasol's recent retirement, plus my birthday. I remember when Marc Gasol came to Memphis. I remember when Mark and Mike Conley, they were having kids and being young and kind of growing up from boys to men. It really does kind of pull at your heartstrings, and it makes you realize that our time on this earth is finite as we get older. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams, the aging out. But it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while, no matter the size. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try, entirely online, designed to be flexible and suit your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/NBA to get 10% off your month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're talking Grizzlies Knicks. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, joined by Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He is the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. I am a co-host that used to write, and now I talk almost every day about the Memphis Grizzlies here with you wonderful people. And of course, Damichael Cole, my personal favorite. Damichael, we have been talking Grizzlies trade rumors. You yelled at me about suggesting the Grizzlies being small at the center position, which I deserved. I'll admit that. I'm proud of myself. You put me on the spot, and I feel like I did relatively well. That was a decent little ranking, right?
You did.
It didn't include the Oklahoma City Thunder, but I need to see the Thunder actually do it when it matters.
Exactly.
At least Minnesota's been in the playoffs and that sort of thing. So anyway, I digress. The Grizzlies are going against another team that has kind of proven that they can do it when it matters. One of the best teams in the NBA right now, the New York Knicks, a team that's kind of banged up, right? Not quite the same as the Grizzlies, but they have their own injury concerns. OG Anunoby, Julius Randle out of the roster for a variety of times. The Memphis Grizzlies injury report, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 names are on it once again. The questionable designation for guys like Santi Aldama, John Conchar, Derrick Rose, Vince Williams Jr. Usually when they're questionable, they have a chance to play. But again, this is the Grizzlies' last game before the trade deadline, if my math serves me correctly, Damichael Cole. If they're close on a deal with somebody, we've heard a lot of rumors about Conchar in particular, maybe they sit him out and they have him in a position where let's just see what happens as the deadline approaches. This is another game where Memphis winning is not as significant as how the young guys like G.G. Jackson look. I thought you covered that very well on yesterday's episode, but also how these 10-day players shake out in terms of showing that they're NBA-capable players. The Knicks should win this game handedly. The key for the Grizzlies is how these other guys at least compete.
Yeah, and before we get into that, it's kind of some irony to the fact that we're talking about the Knicks right after we talked about the future of the center position and whatnot, because this is early. It's very early, but I'm going to say it right now. I think that Isaiah Hartenstein, when we get into the summer, I think you will agree with me, Joe. That's a guy that you should target in the summer. When we talk about addressing the center position in Memphis, a guy who, again, not going to really require too much scoring. He's going to screen well. Look at the way he's playing right now with the Knicks. He's rebounding the heck out of the ball. He doesn't really look to score anymore. And he has some playmaking to his game too. He's really kind of developing as a passer over there. Mitchell Robinson will be back healthy. And again, we know teams for the most part. We saw the Grizzlies kind of do it with Brandon Clark and Steven Adams. But if you look around the NBA, most teams aren't paying multiple centers more than $10 million a year. And Isaiah Hartenstein will command that based on what we've seen. So that's a guy. Watch this guy real close in this game and kind of a vision. Everyone out there in Grizzlies Nation, put your scouting glasses on when you're watching Isaiah Hartenstein, because that's someone to really watch out for in the summer. But I digress. This Knicks team, they will be without Julius Randle. That's a notable exception there for them. I think right before he got hurt, they were probably playing the best basketball in the NBA near the best.
He was probably their second or third best player. Anunoby's been really good for them
he
as well.
Has been, and he's
Randle
been
was all-star caliber.
Yeah, and that's another injury, OG Anunoby. And again, have you seen the plus and minus numbers for him? Like since he's been in New York,
impressive.
It's man, he looks really good over there. But Jalen Brunson is the keys, to this whole thing. I mean, we've seen, there's been a lot of talk about this whole little guard. Can a little guard lead a team? I don't care about any of that talk. The dude is a hooper. He's a floor general. He can score it really at a high level. I want to see what these questionable guys are up to on the Grizzlies side. If Vince Williams Jr.'s play, because now you tell me, hey, you go into this game, you can throw Vince Williams Jr. on Jalen Brunson. Who's the Knicks' second best scorer right now?
Yeah, the Grizzlies can hang a little more tough if they have Vince, for sure.
I'm just saying, I'm not predicting some crazy upset right now. I'm just saying the game will be much more interesting if you can throw a Vince Williams, at Jalen Brunson. The Grizzlies, for all their potential defensive improvements with the guys that are questionable, offensively they're still going to be very shaky. And if you know anything about Tom Thibodeau, defensively, he doesn't play that. He's not going for bad defensive performances.
Sure. I'll go out on a limb. I'll say that if Vince Williams Jr. plays, the Grizzlies cover. The current spread is roughly 13 points. I think Memphis still loses, but if Vince Williams Jr. plays, because to your point, if Anunoby's out, Julius Randle is already out. They're missing multiple contributors offensively. The Grizzlies, again, it might be Knicks by 10, but I think Memphis still covers because Williams is going to be able to at least make Brunson work harder than he's anticipating going into that game. The Knicks are the better team. They should win. I'm curious, Damichael, to get your thoughts on those 10-day contract guys. Obviously, the Boston Celtics game was full of those guys, and you talked a little bit about it on yesterday's show, but who are you most interested in watching in this particular game against that Knicks crew? I'll give you my answer after you go.
I wanted to hear yours, but I'll go first then, because I think at this point, the way this thing is shaking out is a little bit different than I kind of envisioned it in terms of the opportunities that these guys will get. But I want to see Trey Jemison bounce back, because he was the guy who he started against Boston. And if there was an opportunity for any of these three guys to say, hey, I need a second 10-day contract, or I could be, a potential two-way guy, because at some point, me and you are going to have to address the Jacob Gilyard situation, because he's approaching the 50-game max, and it's got to be addressed. But that's neither here nor there right now. But I think in terms of a potential two-way spot opening up, Trey Jemison had a chance against Boston to kind of impose himself in that game. And he had 2 fouls in less than a minute. And he just never got into the flow of the game. Offensively, we know he's limited, but it's the center position in 2024. So I really don't care. I know you have the anomalies out there in Jokic and Embiid, but for the most part, you don't need your center to score 25 points a game or to win championships these days. So with all that being said, I think he's the one guy. I mean, Tosan Ewoma, I mean, the rebounding was good from him, but I haven't seen enough flash in this game, which was my concern. Remember, decent at pretty much everything, but nothing really pops as, oh yeah, he's NBA caliber elite in that area. Nothing really stands out to me. And Matthew Hurt is the typical, how do I put this?
Molasses. I called him molasses last week.
You called him molasses. I'll call him. He's the typical guy who, you don't see Taylor Jenkins really throw on the floor like that, because Taylor Jenkins is all defense first. And if you're not a guy who's going to bring everything on the defensive end, he could care less about you shooting 40% from 3-point range or knocking down the step back 3-pointers and all that. Like you got to bring it on the defensive end. So his opportunity has been limited. But Trey Jemison is the guy for me. Who you thinking, Joe?
Jemison.
I knew it. That's why I wanted you to go first. That's why I wanted you to go first.
For the exact reason that we've been talking about throughout the show. If you're looking for cheap options to fill out the roster long term, here's a guy who, in theory, could fit in a contract even less than Vince Williams Jr.'s, and he can eat minutes for you. He could be your fifth big. That's one of the things I want to see. I want to see if he can be that defensive player, because you're exactly right. I don't give a damn, pardon my language. I don't give a darn if he can score or not. I care if he can defend and rebound and give us 10 minutes a game when necessary.
Yeah.
And if he can do that and show flashes of that, then he's the one of the three that probably has the best chance long-term of actually being on this particular roster. But it's always fun to watch guys that are fighting for their NBA lives. Memphis has a ton of them between the hardship deals and the two-way guys. Jacob Hilliard, shout out to the Richmond Spiders. That's a great example of that as well. It's an interesting game to check out. We'll see how the questionable list shakes out. That could be something that we talk about on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Grizzlies. And speaking of tomorrow's edition, Damichael Cole will be off. Damichael Cole doing his beat writer job, covering the Grizzlies for the Commercial Appeal. So it'll be just me. I'll happily talk more trade rumors. I hope more of them come out. I hope John Conchar gets pulled at the last second. Oh, John Conchar, his wrist got extra sore, poor guy. And I can sit here and speculate with all of our good friends for our Wednesday edition of the show, Damichael. It'll be trade deadline eve and lots of fun things to discuss. I'm excited that for our trade deadline episode, we'll be together coming up on Thursday as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. We'll be able to get into some juicy stuff then for sure.
Absolutely. It's only going to get more interesting in the days to come. So make sure you're sticking with us here on Locked On Grizzlies. Friendly reminder about Locked On launching the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Again, I'll be with you tomorrow talking Grizzlies, Knicks, more trade rumors, all that fun stuff on trade deadline eve. Damichael will be back with us for the trade deadline episode. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to you being with us, you new everydayer, or you still here every day, or whatever the case might be. Every time an episode drops of Locked On Grizzlies, hopefully you're checking out, getting notifications, and joining us Monday through Friday, each and every episode of Locked On Grizzlies, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, and subscribe. For Damichael Cole, I am Joe. Have a great day, Grizzlies fans. We appreciate you. Stay locked in. We'll catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies.